The temperature is nice and warm in the Boiling Point podcast studio, so come on in, get cozy, and let's enjoy the conversation. We empower leaders through thoughtful discussions to positively impact our world. Our host, Dave Vale, founder and CEO of Vision Coaching Inc., is highlighting how we can thrive in business communities. Our conversations with leaders, entrepreneurs, and inspirational storytellers are shining a spotlight on empowerment. Joining Dave this week is our special guest host, Emily Roger. Let's join the conversation with Dave and Emily.
Hi, Dave. We're back for another episode.
Yeah, it feels like it was just days ago we were talking, except your background, mine looks the same, yours looks way different.
I am finally back in my office. I have my microphone hooked up. My audio is hopefully better. It'll be Greg Hemmings when he listens to this that he then calls to say, no, Emily, you still need improvements on it or not. He's my producer when it comes to that.
Yeah, he's the audio expert for sure. I remember having a interview with, I can't remember who it was, but they talked about microphones and man, they went so deep and I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. So yeah, so it's good. It's good to have friends that are concerned. In fact, he's the one who suggested the mic that I've been using. So it seems to be working, I think.
Well, and I had another friend who actually also works for Hemmings House, who fortunately lives very close to me, come up and set everything up for me. So shout out to Andrew McCrae. Thank you for.
Hey, Andrew. Yeah. And for people that are interested in doing podcasts, it's actually, you don't need a lot of equipment to do it, really. And I think sometimes people think that a lot more is required. So just for anyone thinking about doing it, you'd be surprised. It's not, it doesn't have to be, like really high tech. You can actually get into the space with very little technology. It's always good to have help, like we have with Genevieve and others. But it's just something I never knew. I thought you had to have a studio and all this kind of stuff. Not necessarily the case.
Yep. Yeah. If you and I can figure it out and make it happen with our level of technical skill, then anybody can do it.
Well, remember we were trying to do them like in person together and have our guests come in and we ended up sitting across the table from each other and it had to be separated. And so it was like, why are we traveling into one place when it looks like we're in separate places? Like, so yeah, no, you can do it from anywhere with anyone. And in fact, we got a guest in another part of the province today.
Yeah. And with that, Stéphanie Melanson, welcome to the Boiling Point.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, same. So we all know each other because you are also an executive coach with Vision Coaching, so on the roster of coaches. And there's so many things I want to dive into you. I feel like, Dave, you're going to have to really help steer the conversation so I don't get completely sidetracked to all of the things that I just want to talk to Stéphanie about. Yeah.
Well, I think starting by why don't you introduce yourself, Stéphanie? Because what you do beyond coaching is pretty amazing. And I think that our listeners would be really interested in what your other profession is.
So I'm a mom of 3 kids, very active kids, so that keeps me busy. But my main career is mostly family physician, and I'm also a sports medicine specialist. And I just recently got the news that I can transition to mainly sports medicine as my background, and someone will be taking over my family medicine practice, which I am very happy of. And I also do a few different things as well in medicine. So I do a lot of obstetrics. So I deliver babies, which is kind of my happy place, bringing life into this world. So that's part of my main gig, I guess. And I've recently started doing coaching for the last about year or so, which is my newfound passion. And I'm trying to help colleagues as well, physician colleagues in that setting, to kind of empower them and help guide them in this kind of challenging times in healthcare.
when you like, I know we're going to get into this in a bit, but just, kind of what brought you to coaching? Because it's like, you got a pretty full life as it is, delivering babies, what is it about sports medicine specifically that really attracted you? Like, and I know you've done some interesting things in the realm of sports.
So I've always been an avid sports person. I play soccer, I still play volleyball. And I had this kind of interest, but in med school, we're not very exposed to it. So I was lucky enough when I was doing my last rotation as a clerk to get a rotation in sports medicine with Dr. Daniel Dutradi. So he was the orthopedic and sports guru here in Moncton. And it was the Memorial Cup for the Quebec Junior Hockey League. And it was being held in Moncton. So I got to do a full month of orthopedics and sports medicine, following the team around. And that really did grow my passion. And afterwards, he kind of mentored me through all that. And it led me to all sorts of different opportunities that I was mainly able to do while I was on maternity leave. So it was a bit easily managed that way, but yeah.
How old are your kids, Stephanie? Just out of curiosity.
So I have a 5, an 8, and a 10-year-old.
Okay. And are they involved in sports?
Yes. So I have 3 of them in hockey. They all play soccer in the summer. And my daughter does a bit of dance as well. But if I would let them, they would be in every sports imaginable. But time is limited.
Yeah.
You're like Uber mom, just right. Like, oh my gosh, it's so busy. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so with your sports medicine, then, are you mostly working with like specific teams or individual athletes, elite level athletes? What would your...
So I do a bit of everything. So I'm associated with the University of Moncton. So I'm the sports doc for all their sporting teams. And I need to cover the hockey team as well, the men's hockey team, because it's a contact sport. But I take care of all their athletes. I also have a half a day a week, approximately at this point, where I see pretty much anything about sports injuries. So there's a few physiotherapists in town. If they send me clients as well, or people can call in and I can see them, or other doctors might send me their reports as well. And multiple times I've taken the lead of chief medical officers for different games. So you need to have your sports med diploma to be able to do that. So that's kind of organizing the whole medical team for the event.
Yeah, exciting. And so the FIFA tournament was one of those.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest dream come true. And there's a bit of a funny story behind that. So there was 2 FIFA events. There was the under 20 women's FIFA Cup that was coming in 2014. And knowing this was coming along, I applied for that posting. I think I was 1 month postpartum. And I saw it pass through my emails, and I was like, this is my dream job. I'm applying for it, and that'll be it. And so I remember I got the spot, and this was for the 2014 and the 2015 championship. And so we're going up to Montreal for a first meeting conference. And all of a sudden I come back and I told my husband, I said, I'm tired. I don't know what's going on. It was 7 o'clock. I was like, I'm going to bed. And he looks at me and says, you're pregnant. I was like, I'm not pregnant. We have an 8-month-old. I'm not pregnant. Sure enough, a few days later, I was like, well, I'll do a pregnancy test, because he kept on saying that. And I was pregnant. So this was January and FIFA was end of August. So I was a bit scared of my due date. So finally, I managed to do the 2 weeks of FIFA. I was 36 weeks pregnant at the time. So it brought a whole other set of challenge, but it was definitely worth it. So the 2015 FIFA, the women's 2015 was a whole lot easier without that extra weight.
Yeah. Wow. So you are an example of, you can do it all.
I try.
So what was the learning from that, from a big event? And for people that don't know, maybe tell listeners what FIFA is.
FIFA is, what does it stand for? You just got me on the spot there, Dave. Federal International Football Association, I believe. So it's soccer. It's the biggest soccer tournament in the world. The men's events may be a bit more broadcast, but the women's event it's amazing. So that brought, I think it was 4 or 5 different soccer teams from across the world that were competing in Moncton. And the way it worked, it was a Canadian championship. So it was all through Canada. So we had Vancouver, Moncton, Toronto, Montreal, and maybe Ottawa was there at one point, and Edmonton as well. So it was across city, and they would do their kind of championship or their round robin at that venue, and then they would move on for semifinals and all that. That was mostly held in Montreal and Toronto, I believe, or maybe Vancouver. I forget. It's been a little while, but so we had some amazing athletes here in Moncton for that event.
I was just thinking, like, and how important is having these events in different parts of the world. In Canada, you mentioned Moncton, so for people that's in New Brunswick in Atlantic Canada, and what kind of what it not only exposes athletes to a different region, but also exposes like a whole bunch of professionals to different opportunities. And it sounds like that was really big for you, and probably helped you kind of roll into sports medicine more. I don't know, like, did it help you see the path more clearly?
I think it helped me be a bit more adaptable, because we had to hit FIFA standards, and it was fairly different. And I had there was a chief medical officer from FIFA that was at every venue, and my doctor was from Germany, which was very interesting because medicine is not the same in every country. So our skill sets were different. So I think it was such an opportunity to learn how they would work over there and to work with them as well. I think the main lesson is to be flexible in your thinking and to be open and listen to other people's thoughts and ideas, and to kind of brainstorm together and figure out what's the best possible solution for that position.
It seems like such a natural segue to talk about coaching.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I'm like, oh, no wonder you're a phenomenal coach.
Well, no, and just on that, I was just thinking, like, you're talking about the collaboration and and coming to solutions together and that sort of thing. And maybe this is totally unfair of me to say this, but I wouldn't think that physicians are naturally inclined to be that way. And I'm saying that with no evidence of that, but a lot of times, there's professions where, it's, and we've done a lot of work with healthcare leaders over the years, and that's such a great thing to have, and it's not always present, in the training you may have got, to get to, where you're chief medical officer. Does that make sense?
I would say it totally makes sense. In medical school, we barely had any leadership training. So it was kind of, people would grow on their own and figure things out. And everyone had their own style of leading or getting all that information. I think being a family doctor is kind of natural for us because we always have the input of specialists, the input of patients. So I think it's a bit more natural for us to do that. But certain specialties are maybe a bit more direct than others.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And so for you then, where does coaching and the career of coaching then enter into everything that you are doing? How did you come across the coaching world?
It mostly started with reading books and I was like, this is interesting. This is like just a new concept of bringing things on. And in my practice at one point, I noticed a lot of women, professional women mostly, in my age range, so with little kids, that were just struggling with life. And they didn't have necessarily any diagnosis or any issues. It's just the pressures of society and the pressure to be a full-time mom and be extremely present for your kids and being an extremely productive employee as well. It was too much for them. And often it was out of those discussions and just giving them permission to take care of themselves and to carve time in their agenda just for their own health. That really did a big difference. And when I saw them back in follow-up a month later, they were shining. And I just like bringing a light into anybody else's life. So I really enjoyed empowering them. So that's when I started looking a bit more seriously into coaching.
So it was almost like a natural kind of evolution for you, where it's so interesting, because you would see people would express maybe on the outside looking like they got everything pulled together, and then you're seeing them in your office and and they maybe feel safe enough to disclose, like, yeah, I'm not doing as well as I could be, and you see it enough that you thought, because I'm just thinking, you had coaching skills and become a credential coach like you have, and how valuable that would be. Like, I'm remembering times I went in to see physicians, family physicians, and this is going back quite a ways, but there's a certain topic I'm trying to, get into, and I just didn't always feel heard and understood. And it's not, and maybe I wasn't expressing myself the right way, but certainly I didn't feel like I had someone who was, kind of listening the way I would expect a coach would listen.
I guess it comes from personal style as well. And there's also a question of mindset. So when are you coming in? What did that doctor do previously? So sometimes that can be a bit of a challenge, because sometimes we're running from treating a baby to treating a cancer patient or giving a bad diagnosis. So sometimes we're not as receptive. So I can see sometimes it does happen, and I'm sure it happens to me as well. But I find mostly it's asking the right questions, because they don't come in saying, I can't handle all of this. They're coming in and they're saying, I'm tired, or I can't sleep. And they're like, okay, well, let's see what's going on. And then when you dive a bit deeper, that's when you really get to the root of the issue. So I think it's being receptive and asking the right questions as well.
Yeah. And in the coaching world, like what I kind of hear from here in that is that we talk about the coaching presence, and how as coaches, we need to prepare ourselves to go into each coaching call in full service of the client. And sometimes that does require letting go of whatever just happened in our day or our moment or with the previous client. And yeah, for you, of whether you are giving really sad news to a patient, or you're like that, you're just constantly having to switch so quickly. And in coaching clients in healthcare and in like physicians, and realizing how quick that transition needs to happen.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think with time and experience, we get to kind of switch a bit faster as well. But it's definitely been a huge learning curve.
Well, so you went to, did you go to Royal Roads University? I've forgotten, Stephanie.
No, I did my coaching certification through Canadian Academy, Canadian Coach Academy.
Okay. So on top of everything else you have, 3 kids, busy kids, family practice, practicing sports medicine, you decide to do this. What, I guess for you, what was the biggest learning, after getting, your coaching education?
I think my biggest learning was being comfortable about being vulnerable with myself. I think that was mostly it. As a physician, you kind of put your feelings aside and you just go about your day, and the patient comes first, and you're always kind of the last coming in. So I think it was mostly, it was all the process of learning to be a coach. You had to be vulnerable and go look into really deep dive inside of how does my mind work and how can I make it better. I think that was my biggest challenge, but also my biggest learning curve.
And it's a never-ending journey, isn't it?
Exactly.
Like on the coaching front, what I found, I think we talked about this before, is actually, I think Emily, you and I were chatting about this, not on a podcast, but just offline. But like when you meet that client and they, and you're encouraging them in an area of their life, and they're going for it, and they're being courageous, and then you get off the call and you go, "Am I doing that? Am I pushing myself in the same way? Like, what's the work I got to do?" And it's like, oh gosh, I gotta figure this one out, because how can I, how can I be credible if I'm not willing to do the same work? So what's interesting is what you as you're discussing that, or kind of unraveling that, like it sounds to me like that's not really present in how you learn to be a physician. And then so it's almost kind of a new learning for you, and a discovery of like, how do I integrate that in my practice? Like, what's that been like? Because that would be a little bit unnerving, I would think.
Yes. So I would say it happens a bit more with my colleagues. So I'm learning to be a bit more vulnerable with my colleagues. With my patients, not always as much, just because we still need to have kind of that distance.
Right.
So I find it a bit more challenging. I would say maybe adults close to my age, close to my situation, I would easily divulge, say, it's not always easy. We've been through struggles as well. You kind of need to learn. So that I have no issues doing it, but I don't really like being too vulnerable with my patients. They expect me to come up with the answers and the action plan. So I need to be careful, but I've learned to be way more vulnerable with my colleagues.
Okay, that makes sense. And I was just that's interesting you bring that up, because there is a line there where, when people might not be expecting that, and that they might, as a patient, they might find that, unnerving as a patient to say, oh, I mean, you don't know, Dr. Melanson, exactly what's going on?
Yeah.
What would you say, Stephanie? And I think like both as a physician and then also as a mom have been the biggest benefits or takeaways for you, not even as a coach, but as a client of coaching?
Oh, that's a really good question, Emily.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think my biggest learning would be being present. As a busy mom, busy physician, there's always something on my mind. And sometimes the kids speak to me and I'm like, what? Were you talking? I was just thinking about something else. So it's really taking time to be present and to really listen and to be there with them. So I'm trying to stop multitasking.
How's that
Yeah.
Come see, come so.
Well, and it's funny how and I think especially maybe as for moms, that it's kind of like a badge of honor to be a good multitasker. And, I kind of, I wouldn't say grew up, but thought for a long time of the more I can do, the better, the more I can multitask, the better. But then it's like, no, when you there was, one story of I was over at my sister's and my nephew was like, Auntie Emma, do you want to play Lego? And I was like, yeah, for sure. And so meanwhile, I have all these things also going on in my head that I was trying to prepare for work things. And so I'm sitting there playing Lego, but my phone is dinging and emails are popping and I'm looking at them. And he was like, Auntie Emma, like, you said you were going to play Lego with me. And I'm like, I am playing Lego with you. And he's like, no, you're not. You're on your phone. And I was like, oh, like, you called me out. And yeah, the thing about being present. And so for you, with whatever it is that you feel like sharing, what are some practices that you have found helpful to be able to show up present?
Well, I think you brought up great examples, leaving the phone away. So I think that's the first thing. So we try to put it on the counter and not really pay attention to it. And thankfully I have an iWatch. So most of the time I lose my phone, but I can find the back.
Right.
And one of the things that I find really helps is doing little family vacations. So just getting away. One of our favorite places, we have a little tiny cottage in Grandig, which is a coastal town where I grew up. And there's no internet, there's no TV. There's basically just us and the beach. So we get there and we just spend time in family and we try different activities and we play outside, and there's kind of nowhere to hide. There's no technology present. So
Yeah.
that's our little savior.
And then as a physician, what would be your biggest takeaway from coaching?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's organization mostly. Because as being a physician, the demand of on our time is exponential.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the best thing about protecting that time is saying no. I think that was one of my best learning. We're often being either voluntold or being asked to sit on different committees and different things. And at one point, there's just so many hours in a day. So learning how to say no properly is one of my biggest takeaways. And to kind of diverge that towards, I'm trying to lift other women up as they're not always thought of as first. So I'd say, well, thanks for that opportunity. It doesn't work with my schedule right now, but I would recommend Dr. Such and so to see if they would enjoy going in for that position. So I think that would be my most takeaways as a physician per se.
We talked to a colleague, one of your colleagues from Nova Scotia, Nicole, who's also a coach and a physician as well. And one of the questions we were asking her is just like in healthcare, what are leaders up against right now? What are you noticing, whether it's physicians or healthcare leaders, like some of the things that maybe the public wouldn't quite understand?
So I think first and foremost is burnout is one of the main topics, and that's really affecting atmosphere at work. The other thing is staff shortages. That's one big challenge. And the constant adaptivity that we need to do, especially since COVID, like things were changing on a daily basis. Like we would do A, B, and C, and then the next day we get an email and say, no, you need to do X, Y, and Z. We're like, okay, where are we? And just keeping up with all the changes were quite difficult. I think those would be the most. Burnout is a huge issue at this point on every level of healthcare. And that comes back from staff shortages as well, but also just that mental fatigue of having to adapt constantly. Yeah, they have quite a lot of challenges coming up.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've seen a big uptick in physician and healthcare leaders, getting coaching support in the last few years, which has been great. And it's almost to me, it feels like it's just coaching seems to be more credible solution and support mechanism, for these leaders than it would have like 10 years ago when we were first knocking on the door. Any thoughts around if that's accurate, if that feeling's accurate, and what may have, if it is, what may have caused it to be, people leaning on coaching more than they would have in the past?
I think people are a bit more aware of kind of the lack of training we have in leadership, and there's a bit less mentoring going on, especially that they changed the way the system is made, and it's regional. So I'm in the French side of the program, and we go from Moncton all the way up to Edmundston. So having kind of mentors and sponsors is happening a bit less than when it was just like Hôpital Beauséjour, where we were a small family and we knew everyone, and that the person that was picking up the leadership role, well, they had the person that was exiting it that they could knock on their door and say, well, I'm having such and such issue, and where should I go from there? So I think the fact that the health regions kind of change, I think that's one of the factors probably going on. And I think people are looking for a bit more support because we get tapped on the shoulder and say, it's your turn to be the leader. It's your turn to be chief. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't know what I'm doing. And sometimes we get that's done fairly early. So I remember I was within my first 2 years of medical practice, and I got tapped on the shoulder saying, hey, do you want to be the head of family med? And I was like, I'm not sure. I had always been involved in some leadership roles, but I was like, I'm not sure what this entails. And finally, I kind of got convinced, and it was one of the best opportunities I ever had. But I had 2 great mentors right next to me that were kind of helping me through, guiding me through what I had to do. And if I was hit with challenging situations, they would support me and assist me with meeting doctors that were 10 years older than me that were having issues. And so I was really fortunate to have that support around me. And I think coaching, that's what it brings. And it brings also that safe space so that you can be honest and really evolve from what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. And how many fields of work, how many professions there are that you're then put into this career, and that leadership component or the business management or the entrepreneurial skills just aren't there. Like I look at, physicians, people in healthcare, dentists, like just other careers that you're then, it's like, I've also got to run the business on top of this. And how? And having the courage to be able to then reach out for help with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you juggle it all?
I think most of it is I am a bit high energy, so that definitely helps. I certainly have a great partner that helps manage, especially the sports with the kids and household chores and all that. And I have a wonderful cleaning lady. She's a savior. And that's the best investment I've ever made. And luckily enough, we have great family around us they're just always ready to help and support. So I think that really manages it. But I think it's mostly energy, and I'm very driven to make a difference and empower others and lift them up. And I think that gives me more energy. So it's a combination of a lot of things.
There's how you and I'm hearing that is all through this, and in how you interact with your patients and how you interact with your colleagues, and how athletes is that purpose of wanting to support them, being the best they can be. Sounds like it's kind of part of your DNA. And have you always been like that, or is this like a new wrinkle, or what's?
I think most of my adult life I've been like that, but actually thinking back, mostly my sports career, I would mentor the younger players and kind of help them through. And I did a bit of coaching when I was younger and had a bit more time. And I remember switching positions and learning new skills on the field as someone was more comfortable in the position I used to play. And I'm like, fine, I'll try something else and go from there. And so, I think it kind of was in my DNA. I just never thought that far back.
Well, what I find amazing about sports is, you really see it with like friends playing sports or kids playing, your kids playing sports, is just how much you learn about life, through sport. And just so you reflecting on, actually, when I played, I was okay, because not every athlete wants to switch positions, or they want to play on a particular one with a particular individual, or, all these sorts of things. And which will probably shape, how they are when they're older. And, you were already had this kind of collaborative, kind of team-oriented approach, it sounds like. And I find it, and it's all the ups and the downs that go alongside of it it's quite incredible.
Yeah. And I mean, it served me well as well. I remember hurting my shoulder at volleyball, and I couldn't be a power hitter anymore. So I switched to being a setter. And so it was easy to switch because I had played most positions growing up anyways.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
permitted me to play longer, and I'm still playing today, so can't complain.
And being able to like remove the sport and then look at what was the skill set that I had that really made me be good in this sport or excel in this sport? And then how can you take those skill sets and apply it to other aspects of life?
Well, I think for me personally, I've always been a team player, and learning how to collaborate in that team setting in the sports really did help me as a physician, and that kind of adaptivity did help me a lot during learning of being a doctor as well, because we would switch rotations every 4 weeks and learning a new specialty, and also being able to adapt to different personalities, because as a learner you had to kind of please the boss, and that was our main goal. But your boss switched every 4 weeks, and sometimes they switched on a daily basis depending on the rotation you were on. So I think that flexibility and being able to adapt easily was one of the best learnings that I got from sports, but also being able to be that team player and to have open discussions and saying, okay, we're having a challenge. This isn't going our way, because there's ups and downs, and everybody enjoys the ups, but it's what do you do when you're in that down position? So how do you kind of bring your team, rally your team, figure out what's our strategy moving forward? I think that's what really helped me transition as a leader, mostly as a leader, but as a physician as well.
I love that so much. You speaking to that, one of the keynotes I recently gave I spoke a lot about that, and that like around the team sports. And yeah, you put all of these people together who are so skilled and so good at what they do. But then you also have human dynamics.
Yeah.
And how does human dynamics play into it? And whether it is a sports team, your family, you're an organization, that like if you don't have that human dynamic kind of under control and know how to deal with that, well, the team is only as good as like, if you it can either make you excel or completely make it flop. And like learning how to navigating the lows, and
And I also use that strategies with my kids sometimes. They're the point where they understand more and more. So I sit them down with them and said, this isn't working anymore. We need to figure out a solution. What would work? And I find it endearing that they find solutions. And when they come up with their solutions, they adhere to it as well. So that's one of the takeaways I take into the family life as well.
Yeah.
I do find it a little harder to be coach like around my children for whatever reason. Like, so I try to pick my spots because you're emotionally invested, and it's much easier to be with someone who you care about the outcome and them being successful, but you're not as connected to it, and it's hard to sometimes separate. So good for you to be able to do that. So for people listening to this and wanting to learn more about you, Stéphanie, where would they learn? I know one place they can go to visioncoachinginc.com, and there's a roster of coaches, and you can see Stéphanie's bio. Where else would they be able to reach you? And someone else out there is in sports med, or a physician, or a healthcare leader, or someone wanting to be coached by you, or whatever, or someone wanting to learn coaching skills. How could they connect with you and learn more about you?
My LinkedIn profile would probably be the best place to connect. I am in the process of building a website. Just lack of time. It has gone down a bit on my priority list, but it should be up in the next few months. So LinkedIn profile, hospital profile, they can get my family medicine office number as well, where I can certainly be contacted on, or as you mentioned, the Vision website.
Awesome. I so appreciate you sharing your story, and just learning more about how you came to coaching, and it's really interesting that that just how much sounds like it was built from early age, and you just kind of grew it and built on being an athlete, and being a student and being a physician, and it just seems like a natural progression. So to hear where you're at now makes so much sense. But it's kind of like connecting the dots, looking backwards is what kind of comes to mind.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here with you guys, and I really enjoyed myself.
Yeah, look forward to more conversations with you, Stephanie. And so, Dave, we do takeaways at the end of every episode. What is your big takeaway from today?
I like Stephanie. I love what you shared around, what do you do with the lows? When it's easy to take the highs, but how do you handle the lows? And I just think that's where you really see character, and it's just a good reminder. And it's in life, right? And we were talking about sports, but just, unfortunately not every day is as much as we like to, would love to have it this way. There's ups and downs in life. And I like that. I think that's a really good reminder. So thank you for that. That's my takeaway. Emily, what about you?
Mine would be, I think, around just the power of saying no. How we can, naturally, and I mean, myself, absolutely want to take on all these things and do all these things and help out all these people. But at what point do I need to step back? And I actually just did this yesterday, but this makes me kind of even want to dive even more into this of, what does need to be removed from my plate? And that's not necessarily meaning that I'm removing it forever, but maybe just for this season, and being more intentional about where I do really focus my time too.
Awesome. I'm curious for what you said no to for another discussion. Yeah. But I really, appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom, Stephanie, and a perspective that I think just is really helpful for people to hear, especially that kind of with a physician hat on and saying, here's how coaching can be integrated. I just think it's really so cool to learn how you're doing that and your kind of unique way of doing it. So many thanks.
Yeah. Stephanie, you've left me inspired and encouraged. And it's like, just that, you can do so many different things. Like for you, you can be a mom, you can be a wife, you can be a physician, you can be an athlete, you can be a coach, and you make it all work and you do it so beautifully and just fully show up. And this has been a really great conversation. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I really did appreciate my time with both of you.
All right, Geneviève.
Yeah. So we're going to tell everybody where they can find your interview, Stephanie. So best place is head to our website, boilingpointpodcast.com. We will post it out on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And we also post the video version on YouTube and Facebook. And of course, the podcast version is available on all of the popular podcast platforms.
Thank you, and have a nice afternoon.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Boiling Point Podcast. Remember to subscribe and rate our podcast on your favorite listening platform. To find out more, head to our website at boilingpointpodcast.com. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. To find out more about Dave Vale's work, head over to visioncoachinginc.com. Thanks for listening, and make sure to check out our next conversation.